When Soli approached me to write the piece for them, of course I was very very excited. Not only because I have been a fan for many years, and also I have some kind of a connection with San Antonio. San Antonio is one of the cities that I performed the most in the U.S. in terms of the frequency. So collaborating with a local group, a place that is based locally that travels the U.S. and elsewhere, for me is really inspiring because that confirms me feeling also at home in San Antonio. So there's something personal. And of course, the formation of Soli. I heard Soli play a few times, and every time I'm totally amazed. But also the formation of the group. Clarinet, violin, cello, and piano. Of course, people refer to it as the Messiaen quartet because of that landmark of a piece that maybe changes everybody's mind. There's life before that piece and life after it, at least for me. So it's really inspiring and frightening at the same time. Frightening because you're attempting to write a piece that at some point is for the same instrumentation. So in one day it might be played in the same program. So it's something that you keep in the back of your mind. But also the time when the piece was written for me was very interesting, which I think also triggered the title of the piece, Essays on Solitude and Other Ambiguous Emotions. And I think, I'm preaching to the choir here to think that the last year and a half have been very, very special in a variety of ways. Of course, my heart and thoughts go to everybody who has been affected, whether personally or professionally. But in the meantime, what happened to me was interesting. I'm on tour usually as a professional clarinetist most of the year. When I'm home, I'm composing, but it's lots of little islands of compositions between my touring schedule. This time it was more like, oh, I have plenty of time to process lots of things on a deeper level. I think, and the whole idea of solitude. I know, the title maybe linguistically is not correct because solitude is not an emotion, but I think I wanted to play on that a little bit, where many of us felt isolated, but also in solitude. But solitude for many wasn't a bad thing, at least for me. It was a time to discover things that I have kept undiscovered for many years. I always like to think, after living for 20 years in New York City, um, I never paid attention to the city itself. My wife and I moved to an apartment in Brooklyn that has a little backyard. And for me, it was the first time that I dug in the soil of the city. I like to say, I dug in the soil, but also the soul of the city. I noticed the seasons go by. I looked at birds, which I've never done. So are many things that I think that happened because I had this solitary situation, of course, with my wife, but and more excitingly, with a baby who's now 7 months old. So the your universe becomes very small, and I think that allows your brain to compensate, or your imagination starts to compensate by creating whether imaginary landscapes, or you try to dig deeper into, like, what am I feeling right now. And what I noticed, one of the things that I've noticed is uh, that the music I write at many times is a little bit removed from the music that I listen to on my own, whether I'm on a flight or just sitting at home. And I wanted to connect that. I wanted to write something that doesn't try to be something bigger than it is. I wanted to write something that feels calm. I don't want to say like what people are supposed to feel. Of course, I want them to feel whatever they want to feel in the performance. But the piece comes from a place of calmness, a place where every minor little detail in one's life is magnified, and it has the important it needs. A simple conversation over a coffee with a friend that we used to take for granted a year and a half ago now became something very, very precious. And that's what the piece tries to do in three movements. And I call them essays because it's not, I'm not giving an answer to anything. It's just a learning curve for me to try to see what's inside, because this past year and a half allowed me to do so. Lots of the time I'm just like busy from a flight to another flight, from a hotel to another hotel, or from a concert stage to another. And this time it was about taking time, and especially the outer movements of the work. There's lots of time there. And of course, I'm a clarinetist, so I gave the clarinet, you know, a little extra. The clarinet plays a frustrated role somehow. It's somebody who's not super comfortable in this calm situation. It's somebody who's questioning. I think in the four parts, that's the part that is most agitated, even though it is within a calm context. But so I, of course, I identify with the sound of the clarinet, but also I identify with the role that the clarinetist is playing in this context. I'm always too close to the work to isolate where things come from, but really at the heart of this piece specifically, this is coming straight from my heart. You know, it's not in this work, not in any of my works. It's not that I try to mix and match different cultural backgrounds that I feel at home at. I'm from Syria. I've been living in New York for 20 years, but I feel at home in a variety of places, and San Antonio is one of them. But I think the musical language that I've been using, it comes from what I like to write what I like to hear. Let's put it this way. And also I like to play what I also enjoy listening to. And this piece, I tried to make that connection the closest to what would I like to hear right now. What will be something that is helpful for me to listen to. Of course, there are lots of things in the writing. Without getting too technical, um, using grace notes, using lots of ornaments, but also there's some kind of a steady pulse. Again, in the first and the last movement, there's a steady groove, if you want. It's very slow. It's how life, I think, is at times. Has a steady pulse to it. I always like to think that it has a steady pulse regardless of our emotions about it. We always try to maneuver this different pulse of life. Some of us find it very quick. Some of us find it very slow. And this piece is about embracing the slowness. And when you think about the cultural heritage, I always think of people in the let's say in the Syrian villages, for example, or even here when you go to the countryside, there's a slower how the evening unfolds at night in a Syrian village is by far slower and maybe more meaningful of how an evening unfolds in New York City or San Antonio for that matter. So there's that, but I wouldn't say this is just coming from Arabic culture. Again, I'm too close to it to know. What I know for a fact that is, I'm not attempting to try to merge different or distinctive musical styles, because I think at the heart, all these styles share the same thing. Uh, we do music to express or to be more in touch with the human condition, and in that, the musical vocabularies are not more than such. They are just devices we use to express something. Again, at the heart of the piece, it's a calmness with some kind of anxiety that is there, and how we try to wrap our heads around that. Maybe some people will find something I'm gonna say now that is not even in the program notes. Like some of these pieces, these movements, at least one of them, is inspired by things that I've planted in the backyard. Like the first thing that we did when we moved to the apartment, and this is when I was writing the early sketches of the piece. There's we plant one of the first thing we planted was a Japanese weeping cherry tree, and it was really incredible. Like the moment we planted that tree, my wife and I, of how our connection to the city changed forever. You know, because you look around, you see these trees that have been there for like 80 or 90 years, and then you're planting this little tree in the soil and the soul of New York, and you know the tree is there. The movement of that tree is very slow, and it's again the time perception of the tree is so different from ours. And this was one of the thoughts that I had actually when I was writing the piece of how slow things can be again while being very meaningful. So yeah, that's that. It's twofold. One of them is the pandemic, of course, with all the anxiety because you're worried about loved ones and everything, and also the livelihoods of musicians that are certainly affected, not only the musicians. Also, realizing how the musicians fell into that category, the last category of what's essential, what's not, even though it was the time where we consumed art the most, ever. That's one thing, but also having a newborn, having a baby in this mix also changes your priorities too. You know, of how much time you just project to the world and how much time you want to listen to what this baby is saying. You know, with all the fragile sound that he's making, and I'm sure maybe some elements of that found itself into the piece. You know, how we pay attention to what's going on rather than just it's all about what we want to say. I think it's important now to listen to what the world wants to say and what nature wants to say. And I hope that this piece is somehow a reflective of that thinking process. If I'm able to summarize what what I want people to take away, I will just say these words. You know, what I would like them to do is to just usually I like to ask people to like sit back and enjoy a performance. But I think the softness and the fragility of these movements, I hope will make people actually lean forward to get closer to the source of sound. Of course, you know, I'm discussing with Stephanie, with Ertan, David, and Caroline about this, and this is one of the comments I made was I would like this piece to draw people in rather than allowing the audience to just sit back and wait for the sound to come. I would like the audience and the ensemble to meet halfway, somewhere at this really interesting fine line where the stage ends and the seating area begins. Um, you know, if anything, pay attention to the details, to the sound production, but also I would, just pay attention to how amazing Stephanie, Ertan, David, and Caroline are, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are making music out of this. What I delivered is a piece of paper, actually even a PDF in this case, and they are the ones who are making it sound as magical as they will be. I mean, I think I've said it all. It just enjoy, and I hope it just opens a little window of how amazing the ensemble is and how, well, again, how essential art is. I think everybody in the audience is there because they need art, and I think all of us do need that. So I'm happy to be able to celebrate the necessity of art with all of them, and the ensemble and you too.